My task is very simple, to welcome you all, but also to introduce our first keynote speaker. So on behalf of the Vice Chancellor of the University of Bradford and the Dean of the School of Social and International Studies, I'm delighted to welcome you all to the city of Bradford and to the University of Bradford. And let me say, for those of you who attended the Peace Philanthropy exhibition yesterday evening, you've already been welcomed by the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University and the Lord Mayor of the city of Bradford. Speaking of Bradford, Bradford itself is an exciting and multicultural city, famously known as the curry cuisine capital of the United Kingdom. So that is a bit of an advert for Bradford curry as well. And also, we have 27 countries from across the globe participating in this conference today. So be rest assured, we will do our best to make sure that you do enjoy your stay in Bradford. The theme of this 40th anniversary conference, focusing on why war, reflects one of the most pressing challenges that we face in our world today. From Syria to Ukraine to South Sudan, from Afghanistan to Iraq to Palestine to Nigeria, all clearly demonstrate that we have not been able to end the scourge of war. And this 40th anniversary celebration takes place against the background of the commemoration of the centenary of the First World War. So the question is, what lessons have we learned or have failed to learn 100 years after the outbreak of the First World War? So it is this commitment to global peace that motivated the University of Bradford to establish the School of Peace Studies in 1973-74. So in the past 40 years, Peace Studies has emerged as a national and international institution, a global brand, and the world's largest academic center for peace and conflict research. So celebrating 40 years of global education for peace is therefore a milestone in the history of peace studies. It is a unique opportunity for us to reflect on how we could better understand how to prevent wars and create the possibilities and opportunities for peace, in particular long-term peace in our world today. This conference therefore brings together academics, policy practitioners, policy makers, researchers, alumni, and students to share ideas on the intellectual, policy relevant, and practical agenda for peace in the 21st century. So my colleagues in peace studies and at the university therefore eagerly look forward to your keynote addresses and panel presentations. So once more, welcome to the university, welcome to Peace Studies, and welcome to the city of Bradford. Now let me take this opportunity to introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Saeb Saeb Erekat. And ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are familiar with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, we simply conclude that our keynote speaker needs no introduction at all. But let me say that our keynote speaker is a distinguished and formidable academic and journalist, and perhaps the most prominent and influential Palestinian politician and peace negotiator today. One Palestinian newspaper described him as the most globally recognized Palestinian in the Western media. As a distinguished academic, he has served as professor of political science at the National University in the West Bank. And he has published 8 books on international relations and the Palestinian-Israeli peace processes. And most importantly, our keynote speaker is an alumni of the University of Bradford, completing his PhD program of study in peace studies in 1983. He's described his time in peace studies as a life-changing experience. And in an interview in 2006, he commented that it was here in Bradford that he became convinced that there was no military solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and that only peace negotiation will end it. So what has he done with his learning and training that is acquired from peace studies? As a journalist, he served for more than a decade on the editorial board of Al-Quds newspaper, the widely circulated Palestinian newspaper. So this gave him the platform to promote his message of peace and tolerance in the bitterly divided Palestinian and Israeli communities. And in the early 1980s, when he wrote an article in the Al-Quds newspaper calling for dialogue between Palestinian and Israeli academics, he was bitterly criticized for betrayal of the Palestinian cause. And this led to protests against him and even boycott of his lectures in the West Bank. But this reaction only strengthened his resolve and determination to bring both communities and peoples together. So he started a student exchange program in 1983 between the National University in the West Bank and Tel Aviv University. And his reward for this peace-building effort was to be arrested by the Israeli military for allegedly fomenting division among Israelis. So ladies and gentlemen, the experience of our keynote speaker clearly demonstrates that the work and commitment to peace is never a bed of roses. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and students, perhaps the greatest contribution and impact of our keynote speaker is his role as politician and peace negotiator. He is a member of the Palestinian Parliament for Jericho, and he has served as Minister of Local Government in the Palestinian Authority. Our keynote speaker has been the Palestinian Chief Negotiator in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict since 1995. He is a veteran of the Palestinian-Israeli peace talks and negotiated the Oslo Peace Agreement with Israel on behalf of the Palestinian Liberation Organization that created the Palestinian National Authority and the framework for the two-state solution. He is currently working with the US Secretary of State, John Kerry, to kickstart the stalled Palestinian-Israeli peace process, which he recently described on BBC World News as a defining moment in the Middle East. As a veteran of the Palestinian conflict, he has been arrested several times for his outspoken message of moderation, of tolerance, and negotiated settlement. And for nearly 2 decades, he has been at the forefront of Palestinian diplomacy, described by the local newspaper as a new Lazarus from Jericho, because of his remarkable ability to bounce back and literally come back to life after every crisis. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and students, our keynote speaker, Dr. Saeb Erekat. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be back in School of Peace Studies 31 years later. I haven't been here since 1983 when I graduated. And we do realize sometimes how old we get without knowing it. It's an honor to be amongst such distinguished scholars, teachers, and friends. And I've joined the University of Bradford School of Peace Studies in 1980, not for academic reasons, and not for ideological reasons. I had a friend here called Hisham Awartani. Paul Rogers was his professor. And then Hisham knew that I was going to do something different and said, there is a School of Peace Studies, which was one of its only kind on earth. I always felt I was born to do this. Luck, no luck, this is my feeling. And I joined the School of Peace Studies because I wanted to do something about my life. Palestinian people's life. It's about change. I knew that as individuals, we have a choice in life. A choice. We can take the comfortable position, or we can take the right position. And sometimes when we take the right position, the price is enormous. The price, in my case, is that some Palestinians in 1993, when we began the peace process, threatened my family to be torched. I had twin daughters, Salam and Dalal, 9 years old, 11 years old at that year. It took them 6 years of therapy to recover. Paul Rogers and Tom were the guests of my house. I learned a lot in the theory of Western conflict resolution. I learned about interests, options, alternatives, communications. I learned about common grounds. I learned about all these tools for conflict resolutions. And then when I came to apply these tools of knowledge that I learned here at this center, it didn't work. It didn't work. I'm not saying Palestinians and Israelis are different, are better. We're different. I found out that in this region, people have been going to synagogues for 5,700 years, literally saying the same thing every Saturday. And for a reason, they believe they're saying it and hearing it for the first time. I cannot change a single comma of their faith and belief. And next door in the same street, people have been going to churches every Sunday for 2,000 years, doing the same thing. And I cannot change their system of faith and belief. And 1,433 years, Muslims have been going to mosques every Friday. I cannot change anything, single comma, their belief. But I know that Judaism is not a threat. Judaism is a great religion, exactly like Islam and Christianity. And I looked at these great three religions, and there's so much commonalities, the common grounds there, human lives, peace. What's wrong? What's wrong? How come today, in major synagogues, rabbis take pride in attacking those peacemakers in Israel? And imams in mosques stand every Friday to attack those peacemakers in the Palestinian side. Question is not that we're dealing with the better or different or people. We are different in terms of Israelis who believe, who have a narrative, who have a story. I may not accept it. I have a narrative, I have a story. I'm not asking them to accept it. But I've learned that number one thing I should do is maybe I should learn how to respect it. Not to accept it, but to respect it. I'm sure that you heard many Israelis asking me, as a Palestinian negotiator, to accept Israel as a Jewish state. And many of you said, why not? The majority of this country, Israel, is Jewish. Why can't Palestinians say that? I cannot do that. I have my narrative. I have my story. I'm the son of Jericho. The Netophians were in Jericho 10,000 years ago. I'm the son of the Canaanites 4,500 years ago, before Yosha ben Nun brought Jews from Egypt to Jericho. So by simply, when they ask me to accept Israel as a Jewish state, what they're doing, they're asking me to change my narrative. I cannot do that. I have recognized the state of Israel right to exist in peace and security on 1967 lines. But Christian and Muslim Palestinians cannot convert to Judaism and become Israelis. Neither will Jews convert to Christianity and Islam and become Palestinian. This is basic number one thing that we need to establish. Ever since Eve negotiated Adam, ladies and gentlemen, the man speaking to you is the most disadvantaged negotiator in history of mankind. I have no army, no navy, no air force, no economy. My people are fragmented. If it's my word against any Israeli in this country, in the Congress, in the Senate, anywhere in Europe, I don't stand a chance. I'm cost-free. And who said life is about fairness and justice? And by the way, I'm not doing the Israelis any favor when I sit and negotiate with them. I'm doing myself the favor. I don't want my sons to be suicide bombers. I want them to be like your sons. I want them to be the soccer players, the painters, the musicians, the teachers, just like you. I'm doing myself the favor. And I hope and pray that Israelis will feel that they're not doing me a favor when they sit with me. The one thing that's lacking in the Western school of finding the common grounds in any negotiations is that they mention the 7 elements, and they tend to undermine one thing, that people's negotiating behavior is about their history, their economies, their exports, their wars, their defeats, their peace, their painters, their musicians, their poets. It's a reflection of their history, culture, traditions, values, which sometimes different than the others. And we have tended as humans to be ethnocentristic in trying to compare between these behaviors. Accepting is an easy theory that we introduce when we lecture, when we write. But when it comes to practice, it's different. The question today, did we fail in the last round of negotiations? Did the efforts of President Obama and John Kerry fail? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I know the following. Number one, the US did not wake up one morning and felt its conscience aching for the suffering of Israelis and Palestinians, that they decide to bring us together, and they decide to exert every possible effort in order to make it work. In 2014, the US borders are no longer with Canada and Mexico and the 2 oceans. When a nation, superpower, has almost 100,000 of its own kids in my region, their borders become with Iran, Turkey, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, China, the Gulf, Syria, Saudi, Jordan. And when the political geography of superpowers change, the functional role of nations, regional nations, change. And our region today, the Middle East, is going through changes that is, in my opinion, the most important in the last 1,000 years. Changes are going Egypt, Syria, Libya, Tunisia, Yemen, Palestine, and it's going to be all over. Mark my words. It's going to be painful. It's going to be bloody. It's going to be long. But Arabs are democratizing. And anyone who says in the West, Arabs are not ready for democracy is a racist. Period. What's happening in the Middle East today is exactly what took place in Europe in 1848, in a small, sleepy town in Europe called Vienna, when Chancellor Metternich, on March 15, 1848, had to flee his palace in a carriage and horses 2010, Ben Ali had to flee with a jet plane, and Mubarak had to flee with a chopper. That's the different tools of fleeing mechanisms. But it took Europe almost 80 years for its dust to settle down. And these changes in the Arab world are for real. Arabs want to see with their eyes, speak with their tongues and lips, and listen through their ears. And once again, anyone in this Western societies that say Arabs are not ready for democracy is simply a racist. That's the truth. Enough. We have a deficiency in Arab-Western relations. I don't want to theorize. I just want to throw an idea to you. 1683, a small town in Europe, again Vienna, was sieged by Muslim soldiers. And I believe ever since that date till now, Arab-Western relations have not been identified. It's time for such identification. Enough. Politics of fear, politics of changes, politics of seeking people in the Middle East that can serve their interests, whatever. Actually, as a matter of fact, the first attempt to democratize in the Middle East was not Tunisia 2010 or Egypt 2011. It was Iran, 1951, when a gentleman by the name of Dr. Mohammed Mossadegh won 79 seats in his parliament in Iran of 95 seats, formed a government, began changes, began fighting corruption, began building institutions, began touching the real needs of his society. To the CIA and to the British intelligence, this was not compatible to Western interests. They had to bring him down in 1953. Not knowing when they did that they planted the seeds of Khomeini in 1953. Saddam Hussein, to Western politics, a good dictator when he fights a crazy war with Iran for 8 years, and then bad dictator when he goes to Kuwait. Gaddafi is crazy, mad, whatever, and then he becomes Mother Teresa when he listens to them. This must change. This must stop. Because when we have changes in the Middle East, I cannot isolate the peacemaking between Palestinians and Israelis from the bigger picture in the region. One element that will help me make peace one day is democracy in the Arab world. Democracy serves peace. Democracy doesn't produce terrorism. And the second thing that's needed is peace between Palestinians and Israelis. And here we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Christians and Muslims will not convert to Judaism and become Israelis. Jews will not convert to Christianity and Islam and become Palestinians. Having described my situation as a Palestinian negotiator, let me tell you that I know that Israel is a country with 3,000 tanks, 2,000 fighting planes, nuclear weapons, powerful influence worldwide. But having said all of that, and compared to me as the most disadvantaged negotiator in history since Eve negotiated Adam, Israel has 3 options, and 3 options only. Number 1, my option, live and let live. 2 states on the 1967 borders. And we stand tall as Palestinians that I belong to the generation. David mentioned that in 1980 I wrote an article asking to recognize Israel and dialogue. I was boycotted. Students did not take my classes in my universities. There is a price that comes when people want to make changes in their lives and the lives of their societies. Today, almost 70% of Palestinians accept the 2-state solution on 1967, accept the PLO's recognition of the State of Israel to live in peace and security on 1967 lines. And we have advanced to accept also minor swaps in size and value. We have advanced as Palestinians also to say the price of 1 tank equals 2 schools. We want the 2 schools. We can accept to be demilitarized, provided that we render our national security to the EU. We have chosen the EU, not because we want to be Europeans. We're not Europeans. We're proud Arabs, Muslims, and Christians. But we know the trade of geopolitics. And we know that Europe threatens no one in the region. It has a major role to play. And I hope that Europeans will start asking themselves the question, can we do it or not? I know I'm not asking Europe to act against the US. This is stupid to ask. Just complement the US by defining role. What we're asking for a European force the day after peace in the state of Palestine, not a combating force, a force that will make sure that Palestinians commit to their obligations. They can stay in my passages, international passages, airports, harbors, to make sure that we don't violate the agreements, to give a sense of security to the state of Israel. And at the same time, I have a deterrence element here for my national security with the AU. And once again, we're not going to apply to the AU to become Europeans. Never. I know that the Europeans in their history have made 17 crusades to come and take over Abu Dis and Jerusalem and all these holy places. We're inviting them this time to come with no guns, not as a combating force, to come as peacemakers. The region is changing, and with changes come certain elements that we need to think the unthinkable outside the box. And Europe is a crucial element in this peacemaking. John Kerry met with my president and myself 40 times in 8 months. 40 times, 40. Unwavering commitment, relentless efforts, and so on, in order to make the first option doable, the two states on 1967. Unfortunately, during the past 9 months, Mr. Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, moved to announce 10,884 housing settlement units in the land that's supposed to be the state of Palestine. He killed 60 Palestinians in cold blood. He demolished 219 Palestinian homes. Intensified the siege against Gaza. Everyone here knows about it. Everybody here, between themselves, when they shower, when they think, when they write, when they laugh, when they have tears, ask, is this the behavior of the government that wants to make peace? But nobody's doing anything about it. Let's take the comfortable position. By the way, I know in many societies, the division in our minds still whether you are pro-Palestinian or whether you are pro-Israelis. I could care less. The world is divided between those who are pro-peace and those who are against peace. Take the side of those who are pro-peace in Israel and Palestine and the Arab world and anywhere. When you stand against settlements, when you stand against annexation, dictations, you're not against Israel, you're against occupation. And occupation is the highest form of terrorism. If the Israelis, like Netanyahu, Minister Bennett, Minister Lieberman, who's a settler, believe that they want to call my hometown Jericho, Yericho in its Hebrew name, and refer to Jerusalem as Yerushalayim, and Nablus, Shechem, and refer to me as Mar Erekat instead of Mr. Mar means Mr. in Hebrew, okay? I tell them, talk to me about it. Talk to me about it. I'm not racist. Palestinians have never been racist. We're the only ones who have Armenian quarters, Lebanese quarters, Jewish quarters. We stood tall to accommodate all those who were persecuted in their countries and took refuge in Palestine. And today, they are Palestinian Armenians. They are Syrians Armenians. And we have never been racist. We've stood tall that Jews, Muslims, and Christians have lived together. And when I say that, okay, you want to have one state called Israel from the river Jordan to the Mediterranean, talk to me about it. A secular democratic state, they look at me and say, you evil Palestinians, you want to undermine the Jewish nature of Israel. What? I'm offering you a two-state solution on 67 lines. I have recognized Israel's right to exist in 78% of the land, accepted to establish my state on 22%, and then invited Europe to be the third party in my passages, my harbor, my skies, my space, accepted to be demilitarized, And then you tell me that I want to undermine the Jewish nature, and you're the one who's building settlement, because there is no such a thing as a one-state solution. There is no such a thing as a one-state solution. There is a one-state reality that's being created due to the settlement activities and the dictations, and those who believe that God is a land broker, and in his land brokerage agency, he divided things. I told you I cannot change people's narratives. Option number 3, ladies and gentlemen, that the Israelis have, is what exists in the West Bank and East Jerusalem today. There are roads in the West Bank and East Jerusalem I cannot use as a Christian and Muslim Palestinian. Only Israelis and you can use. And such diseases, ladies and gentlemen, such as bigotry and racism, once they inflict underneath our skin, David, we have tended to justify it. Sometimes sociologically, psychologically, economically, sexually sometimes because my color is darker or lighter than you, I'm not supposed to touch you, get near you. And now Israel's pretext for this is security. And no one is immune to such diseases. No one is immune to such diseases if we're going to go the path of analyzing this or that. So these are 3 options for Israel. My option, 2 states. Israel to live side by side the state of Palestine in peace and security on the 1967 lines. A one state where Jews, Muslims, and Christians can have equal votes, or the current situation of apartheid, and never in the darkest hours of South Africa's apartheid were blacks prevented to use roads whites were using. It's deeper, it's worse. Occupation corrupts. And today, ignoring facts don't mean they don't exist. Sometimes we tend to play games with our minds. Let us ignore facts and maybe they disappear. Let us feel that they don't exist. Ignore facts doesn't mean they don't exist. It means you don't exist. It means you are relinquishing your right to see and think when you ignore facts on the ground. It is an apartheid system that exists today in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Whether Israelis like it or not, there is no such a definition of a Palestinian carrying a green ID card and Israelis having blue ones. Palestinians driving car with green license plate, Israelis with yellow license plates. Palestinians have to stop in roadblocks, Israelis don't. If this is not racism and apartheid, what is? Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about 2014. And not only that, there are Jewish kids that come from New York today, Paris, London, to the West Bank. And they believe that if they burn trees, they kill Palestinians, they burn churches and mosques, that they're closer to God. This is not good for the Israeli society. This is not good for any society. This is not good. But these are facts that are happening in 2014. And yet people say, let's not see, let's not hear, let's not talk. And why the world's silence about this? Are these part of the British values or American values or Swedish values or Norwegian values? No. This is not even part of the Jewish values. This is not part of the Jewish values as I know them. It's like my story with people who use my religion, Islam, to commit evil, murderous acts, like what they did in New York or London or Casablanca or Riyadh or Madrid. Muslims are supposed to go to mosques to worship God, not to use God. Jews are supposed to go to synagogues to worship God, not to use God. And so does Christians. The minute we go to these places to use God, we're going to have bloodshed. Using God is one thing. and worshiping God is another thing. And ever since my Prophet Muhammad, God bless him, died, I have researched 799 movements in political Islam. Zarqawi being 799, Hamas 798, Jihad 797, Qaeda 796. The common denominator, let's go to mosques to use God. And once such crimes and murders are committed in London and in Paris and in Madrid and in Casablanca, and by the way, there are more Muslims killed in these actions than anything else. Intellectuals, thinkers in the Arab world are silent. Are silent. This is not Islam. As much as I say this is not Judaism, that's the crimes that are being committed against Palestinians by these Jewish kids who come in the crusade from New York or London to do so. Failure for me is not an option. Failure in the peace process is not an option and will never be an option. It's difficult. It's going to take some time. It's not about, Ecuador-Peru borders. It's not about your normal conflict resolution. It's really about a system of belief. It's about faith. The changes in our minds, we need help. We need help from all those who believe in peace, the idea of peace. My job is not simply to save lives of Palestinians. I cannot be honest with myself if I don't stand tall and say my job is to save lives of Israelis and Palestinians. That is the truth. That is the truth. This is the common ground that we need to seek. And my experience, I've learned that you may employ the interests, the options, the alternatives, the communications, the legitimacy, all the elements that I learned from Paul Rogers here 33 years ago. But any relationships between any of you individuals, between you and your staff, you and your wife, you and your children, you and your neighbors, politics, whatever, any relationship, cannot stand and sustain itself without being fair and just. Fairness is the essence. This is the 8th element that Roger Fisher should have added to his books in any conflict resolution. On this note, I would like to end my presentation, because David has said to me 5 minutes. I'm going to cut it short to 2 minutes, with a quote from Samuel Johnson, who said in 1771, "As peace is the end of war, it is the end likewise, or should be, of preparations for war." And in the West, we have seen many ends of war, but we have never seen the end of the preparation for war. And that's why we're going to continue having war. I'm going to end by asking myself a question. If Palestinians and Israelis know that it's going to be a two-state solution on 1967, Arab, Jewish, whatever it is, why haven't we made peace so far? So let me end with a joke to you. A Palestinian and Israeli go to a Western movie, a cowboy movie. And they sit next to each other. And in the beginning of the movie, the star is riding his horse so fast, so the Israeli, as usual, provocative, looks at the Palestinian and tells him $20, he will fall from the back of his horse in 60 seconds. And as usual, the Palestinian provoked, "You're on!" In 59 seconds, he's down. So the Palestinian carried the $20 and tried to give it to the Israelis, and the Israelis felt his conscience aching. No, I can't take it. "Why? You won. Take it." And the Israeli says, no, I don't want to cheat you. I've seen this movie before. So the Palestinians look at him and say, "What do you think?" "I also saw it, but I thought he would learn from his mistakes." And the minute Palestinians and Israelis will learn from their mistakes, we will make peace. And peace is coming. And failure is not an option. And it's a two-state solution on 1967, where the state of Israel will live side by side in peace and security. That's what we work to do. That's where we're heading to. That's how we're going to overcome these difficulties. And as I told you, you have a choice. Your world divided between those who are pro-peace and those who are against peace. Stand tall with those who are pro-peace. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Erekat, for your impressive, some would say very provocative, but also inspiring presentation. I will not even attempt to summarize the key themes and the central conclusions, but I think the message is very clear. It's an inspiring message, but also it's a message of hope and a message for peace in the future. So what I will do is to open up for questions and answers. So what we will do, we'll take 3 questions in a row and give the keynote speaker time to respond, and then we'll continue. Yes, at the back there.
Peace studies students. During the Palestinian-Israeli conflict used to be on the top of the agenda in the Arab world, particularly during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Unfortunately, it's not the case anymore. Is that because the Arab people or the Arab countries have got their own problems, or because of the divisions among the Palestinians themselves, or what went wrong? Thank you.
Okay. This side of the... Okay.
Thanks very much. My name's Eddie Kanfajuma from the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Conflict Issues. Thank you very much for that. I didn't hear much hope or inspiration. I actually heard something close to despair. What is your view of the BDS movement? And what do you say to people who criticize it and would want to encourage dialogue rather than confrontation?
Okay. And then one in front here, please.
As oil declines to exhaustion and the USA declines with it, do you see hope for resolution as they have to withdraw their many bases from the Middle East?
Dr. Erekat?
I really disagree with you. I think for the Arabs and Muslims, issue number 1 in their minds is Palestine. What are they going through as Arabs is, as I told you, one of the most important developments in their history. It may fluctuate, but go anywhere in the Arab world, Palestine question is the number 1 issue. It's their cause. It's their cause, really. And irrespective of what goes on in Egypt, the Egyptians want to be the ones responsible for Palestinian reconciliation. They want to be part of the peace process. They want to know. They form committees with us now. So does all the Arabs, of course. I want to seize the opportunity to talk about the Palestinian divisions. You know, Hamas is a Palestinian political party that won the elections against my party. And I remember in 2006, I had won the elections in my constituency, Jericho in the Jordan Valley, and I was chosen by my party to respond to Mr. Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, when he presented his government to the vote of confidence. I told him in an open televised speech, Mr. Haniyeh, today you are not the Prime Minister of Hamas. You are my Prime Minister. You are the Prime Minister of the Palestinians. Please act as such. And he responded by saying, no, since we won the elections, we must cancel agreements with Israel. And we cannot accept the UN Charter, and we cannot accept the Arab Peace Initiative. So I told him at that moment, you know, democracy worked, Hamas failed. Today, we began a reconciliation process because as Palestinians, we also found out that we're not perfect. We commit so many mistakes, volumes of them, which we're trying to work. And I hope that all Palestinian parties will understand that when we have differences, we don't resort to bullets, we resort to ballots. And that's the key to Palestine and reconciliation. As far as the question on the despair and the BDS movement and so on, the choice is Israel, by the way. It's Israel's choice. If they want to have a two-state solution, to live and let live, I think no one will go the path of BDS or anything else. If they insist in continuing their apartheid system and their settlement activities and their dictation and occupation, no one on earth can stop BDS. And you saw this year, the guidelines from the European Union, and the movement is really growing. And no one will have the stomach to accept the apartheid that Israel is exercising in the West Bank. If you noticed us this year also, we began a process at joining UN conventions as a state of Palestine. In April 2nd, 2014, we made history. We became a higher contracting party to the 4th Geneva Conventions, 1949, and the additional protocols, 2005. Okay? Israel knows the implications of this. If you hate courts, stop committing crimes. And this is our message to Israel. If you don't want PDS, stop committing crimes. End your occupation. But if they're going to continue this path, the consequences will be our path towards the UN agencies, or asking the higher contracting parties worldwide to shoulder their responsibilities vis-a-vis a sister country under occupation, because we're not the first country under occupation. You know, Norway was under occupation. Belgium was under occupation. Holland was, France, Korea, Philippines. Okay? So today, Palestine status is a country under occupation. The occupying power is called Israel. They don't want to terminate occupation and continue with their dictations and settlement activities. It's going to be much more than BDS. And this is why I said the choices is up to you. And I don't think that anyone on earth will have the stomach to digest apartheid. As far as the US is concerned, as far as oil is concerned, I really believe it's much bigger than these things. It's not me that defines US interests. It's not me. It's not you. Okay? These people came to war against Iraq, Afghanistan, and nowhere. And what we're telling them is that there are two things. Our region doesn't need more wars or the drum of wars. There are two things that are needed in the Middle East region to deliver stability, democracy, human rights. Number one is peace between Palestinians and Israelis. And number two, it's democracy in the Arab world. These are the two elements that are needed. Not more Marines, not more gunships, not more wars. And that is the truth. And the United States must stop treating Israel as a country above the laws of man. That is the truth. And when we're asking about two-state solution, no one is against Israel's existence. We recognize Israel. The question that's put to all those who say that we're pro-Israel and we're going to smear Saeb Erekat, we're going to campaign against them and so on. Does Israel recognize the state of Palestine? Did you hear an Israeli official saying, I accept the state of Palestine right to exist in 1967 yet? I haven't heard it. And I hope to hear it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We take 3 more additional questions and we bring the session to an end. First, the gentleman.
My name is Jørgen Nielsen from Denmark, from the Conflict Resolution Council. And I would like to ask you, now you are very close to Kerry and so on, you have meetings with him. What, in your opinion, could the United States do if it really wanted? Which kind of buttons could they press which would make an influence on Israel? What kind of tools could they take up so there could really come a change? They have not done that until now, but what could they do?
Okay, the front row here, please.
Thank you. My name is Silvia, and I want to ask, how is the role of the media incisive for the peace process?
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah. How is the role of the media incisive for effectiveness.
Media?
The media, yeah, for the peace process, and how media can collaborate with the peacemaking process, in your opinion. Thank you.
So last question at the back. I think I saw one at the back. Yes.
Hi, my name is Andreas. I'm doing the Masters in Conflict Resolution here in Bradford at the moment. My question is, you said in the beginning of your speech that you can't change the other's narrative. So what, in your opinion, has to be done to bring the other's narrative closer to yours, or how you gonna find this common ground you were talking about? It's like the threat of force, the ultimate way to bring the narrative closer together, if that makes sense.
Dr. Erekat.
Thank you, David. I've known John Kerry for 26 years in the personal level. And I know his deep sense of commitment to making peace. And contrary to what people say about US-Israel's relations, in my mind, there are 4 stages in these relations in the last 60 years. Number 1, 1956. The Prime Minister of Israel, Ben-Gurion, American President Eisenhower. I think Eisenhower gave Ben-Gurion 12 hours to pull out from the Sinai. Instructed, ordered him, and he did. Second stage, 1975. The Prime Minister of Israel, Rabin, late Rabin. The President of the United States, Ford. Secretary of State, Kissinger. Rabin decided not to do the second disengagement from the Sinai. Kissinger recommended to Ford that we suspend 6 or 7 agreements with Israel. 17 hours. Rabin was signing in Washington the second disengagement. Stage number 3, 1990. Loan guarantees, 10 billion, requested by Shamir from Bush the father. And Bush the father insisted that none of this money, in any way of fungibility, will be used in settlements in the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. Shamir thought he would work it out to override him in the Congress. And then Bush gave one speech. He said, I'm a lonely man in Washington facing an army of lobbyists to work against US interests. Shamir signed what Bush wanted. 1991, Israel was attacked with, I think, 39 missiles from Iraq. The fingers that defended Israel were not Israeli fingers. They were Americans, Dutch, and German. Israel was prevented by America to defend itself. So when it comes to US-Israel relation, in my opinion, if the US wants a 2-state solution, they do it. That's why they're investing so much on it. That's why Kerry is meeting me for 40 times, and meeting President Abbas 40 times. Now, why didn't, do we need to reinvent the wheel here? If we know it's 2 states, 67, agreed swaps, demilitarized, and all these things, why couldn't it happen? Why did Netanyahu continue pushing the Americans to the wall with settlement activities which the Americans called illegitimate, and with the dictations and so on, and without putting a map on the table? Well, maybe some people in Washington would like to see the dust settling down in Egypt, Syria, and so on later on. So that's I don't know, what's the Americans' mind. If the Americans want to do it, Americans asked us to recognize Israel, we did. Asked the Arabs to have an Arab Peace Initiative, they did. You know, the Arab Peace Initiative 2002, the Saudi Arabian king introduced the most strategic initiative since 1948, saying if Israel withdraws to the 67 lines from Syrian occupied territories, Palestinian occupied territories, all Arabs will have normal relations with Israel. And this stands. So what does Israel need more? So I believe this is a question that should be put to the US and its European allies. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? I believe we live in an age of accountability and transparency, and I think people should know, and I think media is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 24/7, all over. And I really believe that in my negotiations, practices, and theory, is that the public should be part of it. We should not hide from the public. We should explain to both whatever constituency that I have what's happening. we should be accountable. Because if we're not, people who create their own stories and ask me, I suffered personally so much from sometimes listening to Americans not saying things because they don't want me to shut up and not to say anything. And then people would like to write stories. And some journalists will call me, okay, we created this story today, so you can deny it, we have another story tomorrow. So I think it's better to engage the media, it's better to be transparent and to be accountable to them, and this will help you at the end of the day, because negotiations is not about a soccer match, it's not about war, it's not about any of these things. And I believe the best negotiators are those who go sleeveless, are those who really study the concerns and the fears and aspiration of the others as much as they do theirs, in order to build the common ground, because you're not cheating them, you're not fooling them, you cannot. But you have to keep in mind that the media can play a major role in distinguishing between those negotiators, whether they are tough negotiators or non-negotiators. There is a vast difference between those who are non-negotiators and non-negotiators. And as much as we have a chapter in conflict resolutions called How to Reach an Agreement, there is another chapter called How Not to Reach an Agreement. And I think the media can be so much... About narratives, I don't think we can change anything in narratives. We cannot change it. We cannot change the narrative. You cannot change my narrative. I really believe it, whether you like it, whether you accept it or not. I was born in Jericho. From the window of my house where I was born in, I live in the house I was born in, I see the Mount of Temptation from my bedroom, where Jesus did his fast for 40 days. 7 minutes drive is the Dead Sea. I have the Umayyads palace. I have a long, long story. It's 10,000 years old. So a lot of times I have to speak to you now with historical insinuation. I think of tomorrow as historical. I think of yesterday. It's me. It's me. It's my narrative. And I know that Israelis and Jews have their own narratives. I said, I'm trying so hard to respect. But they shouldn't ask me to adopt their narrative. I shouldn't ask them to adopt my narrative. What we need to do today is that this is a political question. It's not about religion. It's not a religious war between Jews and Muslims and Christians. It's two national movements claiming the same land, and the answer is to partition the land, to have two states. So let us avoid speaking about the religious aspects of it. Ironically, when they ask me to accept Israel as a Jewish state and say no, most of the Islamist political parties don't refer to Israel as a state of Israel. They refer to it as a Jewish state. If you follow the teachings and speeches of the Wahri and all those who sponsor, who use God in my region, in my religion, they don't refer to Israel as a state of Israel. They refer to it as a Jewish. My advice to the Israelis, let us confine our conflict to the parameters of politics or nationalist movements, and it is the two-state solution, the state of Palestine, to live side by side the state of Israel on the 1967 lines. Thank you.